Jess and John Nation, JJ Nation. It's Jess.
And I'm John. Hi, Nash. How you doing?
We got a really good episode for May Day. It's a big labor holiday, and so we have two sick interviews. One with Eric Blanc, who is a professor focused on labor studies at Rutgers, and then we have Mike Francingue, aka Big Friggin' Mike,
Big
friend of the
friggin'
show.
Mike.
Uh, Before that, we're gonna get into some really fun news. So let's dive right in. Trump said he wants to be the Pope.
What?
When he was asked, who does he think should be the Pope? He told reporters outside of the White House, I'd like to be Pope. That would be my number one choice.
Man, it's just, what a time to be alive. And you got the guy who's just like feeding the Constitution into a wood chipper and handing all semblances of power and control to the weirdest, creepiest billionaires on earth. And it would be so great if he also wasn't a hilarious idiot. Nothing about what's happening is funny, but come on, man. Who I guess we all had it on our bingo cards. Our president is of course going to nominate himself to be Pope, but like, have you stepped back and thought about that? Oh my God, it's crazy. And it's just like not even an anomaly either.
I think this is an indication as to how the talks are going as to what the law and constitution says about another run for president for him. He's
He's like
considering
president.
Pope. Yeah.
Nah, Pope.
It's not going well. They're like, well, yeah, it looks like pretty much 2 terms, and then the law says no more. And so he's so desperate, he's considering Pope.
Uno
Popeship?
reverse. I'm going to
Popehood?
be the Pope. So sorry, Pope.
Imagine
Trump
him
in the
giving speeches in the Vatican. Imagine him in the outfit in the Pope mobile.
in the
Wait,
no
I'm
no
gonna AI image this, and we're gonna have this for the pod.
yeah, the
Except
Pope
it might be
mobile.
considered political.
Oh yeah, true. We don't want to do that, but I can just see it now. The Pope Mobile turns into like a Buick Regal or whatever.
It's
He's,
just filled with.
he likes his tariff policy from the 1980s. I feel like if he was the Pope, we might get a return of like the big fat Cadillac or something. It really seems like his vibe.
Yeah, the AI search engine I use, it like blocks anything that could be used for like political fake news and elections. But Donald Trump as the Pope, like he's a reality star, you know? Just generate the fucking image, robot. Come on, man.
I
Um,
really want God's actual take on this. If there is like some big sky daddy
if you're
somewhere,
out there.
yeah, can you like come onto the pod, God? And not our producer, Gabi Schulte, who is the actual God.
Yeah, true. RIP. Gabby's not here with us. So if this podcast is disorganized, it's
You know
because
who to
we've been
blame.
let loose. So Lindsey Graham actually responded to what Trump said. He said he was excited to hear that President Trump is open to the idea of being the next pope. He wrote that on X. And maybe that also has to do with the fact that he's excited that he's not trying to go for a third term. He's like, you know what? I'm glad he's considering popehood, popeship. What is it? Popeness?
Popedom?
Your popeliness?
Yeah, popeness, popedom, your papistry.
Oh.
That's bad. All right, that's all I got.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I'm not even if Gabby was here, she would have already searched it, but we don't have her, so we're just gonna keep making shit up.
Yep.
Let's go on to not so different from what I was just talking about, AI regulations. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, he's been going on like the cable news circuit quite frequently and delivering a similar message. This was sent to me by my buddy Invictus, who does a lot of economic policy analysis and writing. And I trust his opinion and has said that Lutnick has repeated the same sentiment multiple times, very concerning. So this is a direct quote from him on, I believe, CBS. These these are trade craft. It's time to train people, not do the jobs of the past, but to do the great jobs of the future. You know, this is the new model where you work in these kinds of plants the rest of your life and your kids work here and your grandkids work here. You
Hot.
know, we let the auto plants go overseas. Right now, you should see an auto plant. It's highly automated, but the people, the 5,000 people who work there, they're trained to take care of those robotic arms. They're trained to keep the air conditioning system. So this is the future he sees for working people as taking care of robots in factories. Now, I said this at the very beginning, and people were like, "You sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist." Dude, the Commerce Secretary is saying it too now. What do you have to say to me about it, MAGA? Replacing 100,000 factory manufacturing jobs with 5,000 people being caretakers for robots is not an economic plan. This is not going to be a good economy for the working people of America. It will be a good economy for the factory owners and the factory shareholders. And when you consider that the top 10% holds about 88% of total stocks in America, it becomes crystal clear that this is an economy for them and their rich friends.
Yeah, I love how you really see the wealth gap show up when these people start to like share their vision for working people. It really becomes clear how out of touch, like how rich they are and how out of touch they are. They're like, oh, listen, America, this is not going to be so bad. All of you people are going to work forever lubing up robot arms. Doesn't that sound awesome? And then we get to take the money. Huh? Do you guys like that? And it's like, how do you have power? I don't understand.
Do you guys like this? Doesn't this sound fun and good for all of you?
Hey America, I
Um,
got a giant plan. What if like I own all the robots, you guys go up there and you're caretakers for robotic arms and you get none of the benefit and we kind of get all of it and you work forever. Deal?
Deal.
So bad.
Yay, when do I start? Ridiculous. It's so out of touch that they think they can go on TV and say this, and people won't go, hmm. Like, it's almost an assumption that, well, we can convince them that it will trickle down still in some way. No. Like, we'll just have tons of factories in America producing stuff, and you all will take care of the robots and we'll just sell infinite things while the planet cannot sustain this kind of output. Like, we live in a planet with finite resources. Like, there's only so much Earth that we have. We're going to reach a point where we can't grow anymore. What's the plan? Like, we're already there.
Yeah, it really makes me think of whatever that computer law is, where it's like the chips in whatever amount of years, it's like the chips get so many times faster and half the cost, and that just keeps like going exponentially. And now we have like artificial intelligence, and in 10 years, it's going to be totally unrecognizable. Which is all to say, like a long running theme, I feel like of the show here is just like, hey, everyone, we cannot live with the politics of the past because it doesn't apply to our present and is like hopelessly out of touch for the very near future. Like, we all have to update ourselves for a time where like technology really comes off of the top rope and like levels. So I was reading this somewhere. It was like blue collar, white collar. How about no collar? And like technology is really going to like flatten those distinctions and it's happening faster than we think. It's all in the control of these weird people who go on TV and say, oh, it's going to be great for you. But like right now, we've got to update our politics for the problems that are coming down the line. And one of the biggest ones is like, who is going to benefit from this enormous productive capability of all of these robots, for lack of a better word? And if we don't assert our power right now over our workplaces, over our government, we don't have political parties whose baseline is to end the power of billionaires, to tax them out of existence, then we're going to be caught flat-footed when all of this stuff happens. So now's the time to make big changes, starting from within.
Yeah, the top 10% owning 88% of the stocks. And like obviously the people who own the biggest corporations are in the top 10%, if not 1%. Um, they own the economy. Like that's why we say ruling class so much. They literally own the American economy. And when we talk about the idea of communism and people have this fear of a communist economy, it's because they describe it's like if you ask them what are you afraid of with communism, they say it's owned and run by a small group of people for their interest and benefit, and they describe the situation of the American United States. And so it sucks that these words have become near meaningless because they've been distorted by propaganda. But listen, if what you're afraid of is an economy run by a few rich guys, that's what we've got here, and it's time to do whatever you think you would do if your
Yeah.
economy was in that situation.
Yeah, it's a dictatorship of the billionaires, and that's what people that communism has been so like propagandized and everything that it's just the word has become synonymous with total control, right? But that's what we have, like you're saying. It's just that the billionaires are in total control right now, and we have to update ourselves to that. Um, another thing too, like we do the show, we make these points on the show, and then my dear sweet family in the conservative place I grow up, they listen to it, my friends as well, and it's going to take a minute for everybody to update their opinions. But a lot of people who have small businesses, or they have a little chunk of change, or they're just walking around the street and they respect the business owner in your community. I think they hear a lot of the stuff we talk about on the show and say like, oh, are we talking about the people I know? Are we talking about somebody with 10 or 30 or 40 or $50 million? I just want to clear up. Those are not the people controlling the economy. That when we're talking about the ruling class, yes, those people are materially much different than most of your people walking around. 6 in 10 Americans living paycheck to paycheck. But really, when you're talking about the ruling class, it's if you go bankrupt, is the government going to step in and bail you out because your bankruptcy is a threat to the economy? Okay, that if it is, then you're the ruling class. If not, then you're with the rest of us, in my book. Can you, are your personal investment decisions, if you just sold your holdings, would it cause a run on the banks? Okay, if not, then you're with the people who have to go to work in the morning. So we got to update those lines to reflect what's going on in our economy, I think.
Yeah, I just listened to Brett Goldstein, who is Roy Kent in Ted Lasso. He did a stand up special on Netflix, and he said, I really care a lot about the most important issue facing our time, wealth inequality. And I would always go to these protests with my friends, and I went more recently now that I'm successful. And I was like, tax the rich. Well, maybe on a case by case basis. And it's like, he still has to work for a living. If he stops working, he cannot sustain himself for the rest of his life. People who have to work for a living are in the working class. And we see people with like $500,000 homes or even $1 million homes, and they're making, 200K a year. And it's a huge gap when people are struggling to afford their most basic needs. But really, what we're talking about is people who can just put their money in places and it turns into more money and they never have to work a day in their lives. These are the people that are a problem and they're leeches on society.
Yeah, if you can't
Um,
call Howard Lutnick right now, then we're not talking about you when we're talking about the ruling class.
yeah, let me see your phone contacts and we'll talk about
Yeah.
it. I really want to talk about AI specifically because this is a tool that's going to let the working class become infinitely rich. And right now, OpenAI, who is behind ChatGPT, it's been a nonprofit with an explicit mission to ensure artificial intelligence is used for the benefit of humanity. And its leadership led by Sam Altman, who we've probably seen in the news, its CEO. He has stripped the nonprofit board of their power and has gotten rid of a lot of the safety focused members of the board and is pushing OpenAI to change and become a for profit company, which is a move that would get rid of these public safeguards. It would scrap the nonprofit protections and it would really put, profit at the center of OpenAI's future, which is a very different decision making framework than let's use AI for the benefit of all humanity. The most likely path that will benefit all of humanity is specifically how they say it, which is an interesting choice of words, but they've had massive tax breaks. Their investors' money that's gone into it is allowed to be claimed as a donation to a nonprofit, and they have all these public funds, which has really positioned OpenAI as the leader in AI technologies. And so now these resources can be used for investor profit. Sam Altman, who used to always talk about, like, oh, I don't even have equity in my company. Now he would have billions. And so this would really change how AI is used in America. And it's scary because AI safety, I think, is important.
ChatGPT just got a gold chain and a pinky ring. Y'all, everybody watch out. People are
Yeah.
smelling money with this.
I mean, the good news is it can still be blocked. So the attorneys general, and as well as the board at OpenAI, can change this. They can block or condition the transition. That's really important. I remember when Cambridge Analytica had their blow up because they were using their tech and sort of machine learning to specifically target people on Facebook with misinformation and fake news. And it was a part of the Trump campaign's political operation in 2016. And one of those whistleblowers that came out and talked about this said, data science basically is like a knife. You can use it to stab someone and kill them, or you can use it to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And we're not going to say knives are dangerous, you can kill people, so no one's allowed to ever have a knife. But we don't allow them in schools or in the airport or on the airplanes. Like, I get that AI can be used for good. I use AI, for all kinds of things. I use AI to generate images for fun sometimes. I use AI for, you know, my color analysis and picking outfits and scheduling and things like that. It can be used for good. It's being used to diagnose cancer at faster rates and read medical imaging. And so it can be used for good, but it can also be used for really bad shit. And like having OpenAI become a for profit entity, you can imagine the kind of future it would bring out.
Yeah. If this stuff is going to control your life, then why shouldn't we all control it? I guess. I mean, is that a dumb question? Maybe I should ask AI instead of asking it who would win in a 100-man versus one gorilla fight.
Yeah. So if you're in California, call your attorney's general office. This is also a problem all across America. So give the attorneys general of California a ring over in Sacramento if this is something you care about.
Do that. Seize the means of these robots.
Let's talk about the stock market again because
Oh,
Trump truthed. Okay.
he,
January 29th.
he truthed all of us. We got truthed, everyone.
Um, he said, so this is his first few days in office, This is the Trump stock market because my polls against Biden are so good that investors wait. So this is, sorry, 2024. My timing's fucked up. Biden was president in
Yes.
2024 in January. Um, so this is a year before Trump's inauguration. He hasn't been elected yet.
Yes.
So he's taking credit for. I also had I'm so bad at time, John. I had a viral tweet and
Oh, I
I
think I saw
said,
this.
oh, Luigi Mangione and I got breakfast on the morning of December 6th, 2025.
In the
And,
future at Rikers
and
Island.
so it was like a great alibi for the future. And I was like, sorry guys, I'm really bad at time.
What
Um,
happened on December 5th, 2025?
we're, what are you guys planning? I was like, Cash Patel is gonna knock on my door and be like, we got her. Anyway.
Thought crime.
So when Biden's in fucking office, Trump is tweeting, this is the Trump stock market because my polls against Biden are so good. Investors are projecting that I will win and that will drive the market up. Everything else is terrible. Watch the Middle East. And record setting inflation has already taken its toll. Make America great again. Fast forward to yesterday, April 30th. This is Biden's stock market, not Trump's. I didn't take over until January 20th. Tariffs will start kicking in soon, and companies are moving to the USA. Our country will boom, but we will have to get rid of the Biden overhang. So, when the stock market's good, he's not even president. Biden's been president for 3 years. He takes credit for that. When the stock market is bad, very much as the product of his decisions, that's Biden's fault.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that this guy just is lying and ripping us off. That's really not more complicated than that. He's been in media forever. He has a massive, just a death grip on all of our attention. As our attention has gotten fragmented, somehow this one weird boomer like hacked it and knows how to do it. And he's just lying, all the time for his benefit. And unfortunately, it works. Because you flood the zone with bullshit, and then people don't know which way is up, especially in the absence of crystal clear communication and like moral authority from the alternatives to the guy who's just like, kind of hilarious and is like, hey, I want to be the Pope. And also just, lies about everything else. Right. There's no alternative that is like crystal clear with an analysis of the problem that can go up against this fucking hog man and whatever shit he wants to lie about. So here we are.
Remember when they said you could do anything in America if you were smart and hardworking? I think it's actually you can become anything in America if you're funny.
Yeah, man. If it's just one running bit and you are willing, that's the other thing, like this really shows how far you can go if you have absolutely no shame. If you're the president of America, can you imagine if you were the president and you just like went outside to the media and you're like, I'd like to be the Pope too. What? What? I mean, that's the level of commitment to a bit that I guess you got to respect the game. But goddamn, I wish our future wasn't tied up in it.
Imagine Biden in the debates, like with Trump, like, I'm the first Catholic president, and if I don't win this, I'm gonna become the Pope.
I'm trying to become the Pope, man. I
But
was out here
I'm
with the Pope just yesterday.
gonna be the first Pope from Scranton, Pennsylvania, folks. The economy. Okay, we're done. Um, so the first 100 days have been really entertaining, but unfortunately, we've seen the fall of America. John, what's your take on the first 100 days? You just came out with a video. Tell us about that. How did that go? Just even reflecting on the first 100 days.
Well, it's kind of like a mix of everything we just talked about. I mean, the guy is moving super fast and just like throwing out a bunch of lies. Nobody really knows which way is up. But Trump supporters definitely have their guy, and they're not leaving anytime soon. They're rooting for him. So I just had a more perfect union piece drop about the Trump first 100 days. We went down to a dirt track in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Not a liberal in sight. Not a liberal in sight. I love the dirt track. I'm a fan of it myself. And you certainly get some interesting political opinions there. But like with every piece that I try to put out with More Perfect Union, it's really trying to show the possibility of solidarity among all working people. And that includes, especially in the most unlikely places, a dirt track in Parkersburg, West Virginia. So we talked to hardcore Trump supporters and we just let them speak. And the thing about that is that over and over again, they will tell me straight to the camera that they want Medicare, they want Social Security, they want high wages and unions. They want antitrust and end to corporate greed and big money in politics. These are things that I hear all the time when I go into Trump country and just kind of let people speak about what politics should be like. They tell me that they want power back in the hands of working people. And, um, you know, it is worth acknowledging that, yes, these people get very salty about the theys and gays getting center stage. But it's not like they don't want them to exist. I think what's happening here is a population of people that are not used to experiencing pain are experiencing it for the first time. And yeah, they're not handling it well. But my observation from just like doing this body of work is that that doesn't mean that they are not ready to stand and fight with other people in their class. It's just that we have one guy who is completely capturing their attention with lies about all of those things that they want to see, with lies about preserving Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and sticking up for the working class and union jobs. Of course, he's not doing any of those things, but people see him lying about it and they're like, well, hell yeah, I guess this is our guy, because there's an absence of a compelling alternative right now. I will point out this is filmed in West Virginia. It's a state where Bernie Sanders won every single county in the state. He's out there right now, talking about the real deal. I think that kind of politics has significant potential to catch on in this political moment right now. That's why you see all those people out there in those rallies. And if what we get out of that is a new generation of candidates who are talking about the real deal and actually making moves to counter the power of billionaires who have been stopping this forever and kind of making an assault on all those things, Social Security and Medicare, then we could see weird coalitions come together. That is the take that I have after going down and asking people how it's going in Parkersburg, West Virginia. So there was Doge actually fired a bunch of people in Parkersburg. There's the Bureau of Public Debt. It's one of the best jobs that you can get in the area. Doge and Elon Musk came in there and did their bull in the China shop routine, and it ended up affecting the lives of a ton of people in Parkersburg. It's a town that lost their manufacturing base, so those jobs at public debt are very important. And you saw people wrestling with that fact a lot. You didn't see a wholesale rejection of Donald Trump, but I think we are in weird political times, and if we get new and different candidates that are speaking to the things that all of these people tell me they want, who knows what could happen? I mean, Donald Trump is president and wants to be the Pope, so why not a working class revolution, right?
I think the Democratic Party has focused on the theys and gays because they get a bunch of money from the richest people in America. They have money in the stock market. They are the ruling class. So, of course, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, this other issue that has to do with something other than the flows of capital, for sure, let's centralize that. And of course, if you're struggling to keep a roof over your head and feed your kids, you're going to be like, why the hell is that the focus? And I get that. Like, if I was in a room with people and we are talking about politics and we are talking about women's rights, very important subject, and someone interrupted me and they're like, wait a minute, let's talk about actually how my family is struggling and we're going to lose our house and the landlord's evicting us too early because, we were late on rent one time. I'd be like, yeah, fucking fuck my rights. Let's talk about that because you need to keep your house. Like, we don't need to talk about like our issues that have to do with our identity when people are struggling to survive. I think we can have a bigger conversation around identity politics when people are made whole. And it sucks because a lot of the people driving the conversation in the queer community are the richest among us. A lot of my friends who are queer, union workers who are trans, they want a strong union. Yes, they're afraid that these people are crazy and think that their transgenderism is so weird that some of them want to kill them, but they really understand that the fight in America is one for survival. And if we can get us to all band together, um, maybe that will help bridge some of the fractures that have been put in place by the ruling class that make us want to fight each other because we're different.
Yeah, and I have I have no sympathy at all for elected Republicans at this point. If you signed up for this, then you know what's going on, and there's really no redemption for you in my book. For Trump supporters, though, I think this is a population of people that is experiencing what we're all going through. I mean, they're part of the 6 in 10 people who are living paycheck to paycheck, and they've also been the target of the best propaganda machine the world has ever known. People much richer than them, the actual elected people with power in the Trump administration, for years constructed a machine. They know that, if you want rule by 1,000 of the richest people on earth in a democracy, then you're going to have to divide the working class. So they built a machine to do that. And they aimed it at the people in Parkersburg. And we shouldn't be surprised when people then cannot tell what direction is up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, though, that while they might have opinions that are, not the most politically correct about the attention being on the days and gays, once again, just from living in this community in Wheeling, West Virginia, where we have a lot of trans people in Wheeling, West Virginia, just like everywhere else. Okay, they've been around forever. You can coexist here. That's not to say that it is easy by any means, and I can't speak for that population. But what I want to say is, through doing these pieces and talking to these people, I still believe that if somebody articulates a political movement that says, "Hey, if you're a white union worker who's voting for Trump and you're a trans person in West Virginia, you still have more in common. You still are locked out of power, and we will not win all of the things that we both want for ourselves until we join together and address the fact that billionaires and the elite class have all the power." Somebody hasn't really articulated that kind of political movement, but those people I talk to aren't going to be immediately opposed to that. I think we just haven't seen that come together yet, and haven't seen a group of leaders who can say that, the white working class union worker and a transgender person still want their freedoms and still want power over their workplaces and government. And when somebody comes along and does that, you're going to see political coalitions shift along, and we need to get there sooner than later.
I think after 100 days, we know the answer is not right wing populism.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get it? It was a Pope joke.
Populism.
Populism. All right, sorry. I'm so sorry for that.
That's a hashtag for the
I've been in the
show.
Midwest too long. So we're going to get into our interviews with Eric Blanc and Big Friggin Mike. But before that, we're going to take a break for an ad. Hello, listeners. This is Jessica with the Jess and John podcast. We don't have anyone buying ads on our network, so this is an advertisement for you to be an advertiser. So if you work at a nonprofit and you've got a phone bank coming up and you want some dedicated folks to show up, advertise. It's probably really cheap because we don't have any bids yet. So this word is not from our sponsors, but it is to maybe our future sponsors.
This is a buyer's market, baby, and it is hot, hot, hot. Jump in here before we issue a meme coin and start to use our social media platforms to inflate the value and pull a rug pull on all of you people. And also, it's an advertisement for our listeners, because the best way to support this show is to go rate and review it and share it with a friend.
All right, JJ Nation, we're in for a treat. We've got Big Friggin Mike on the pod today. Mike Francingue from over in Colorado. Mike is a union worker. Great dude. Welcome to the pod.
Thank y'all for having me. Good to be back.
Hi, Big Freaking Mike.
Let's get into, tell us what you do every day. What is your job?
So I am a traffic control supervisor for a company here in Denver that works for a larger utility company. And basically what that is anytime you're driving on the road and you see like a lane closure or a road closure, anything like that, we're the guys setting those up. And I'm organized here in Denver through LIUNA Local 720 in Denver. And good folks. And they do their best to take care of us here in Denver.
Yeah, Colorado's an interesting place for labor right now because they've got a Democratic governor, Governor Polis, who has in the past already vetoed some pro-worker legislation. He now is he still considering this Worker Protection Act, or is it past due now, Mike?
So it is still working its way through the legislature. It's currently in the House. It has passed the Senate. It's been read twice, and there's typically 3 readings before it is voted on in the full House. It is expected to pass the House. We have a pretty blue majority here in Colorado. Polis, unfortunately, leans more on the libertarian side of Democrats and has definitely threatened to veto, which I'm sure has nothing to do with the fact that he's a 100 millionaire several times over, and he listens to the business interests more than the labor workers here in Colorado.
Nothing like a libertarian to let you experience your personal freedom and liberty to be exploited by your boss. That's really nice of him to care so deeply about that.
Right.
So the way that like union voting is set up, you've explained it to me before, Mike. I'm going to do a bad job regurgitating it, and then you can correct me. So basically, they require 2 votes. 1 vote among the workers to unionize at the classic NLRB threshold of 51%. Then there has to be, or like 50 plus 1, right?
Right.
And then there has to also be a second vote that confirms that they're going to pay dues. And this bill would get rid of that second vote because it's, you vote to have a union, you should have one. Is that right?
You did. You nailed it. The only thing is on that second vote, you have to break 75%. So you have to have 75% plus 1. And I think my cat's trying to make an appearance here, but
Yeah, cats are
We're cat
welcome
friendly.
on the
yeah,
Jess and John pod.
hold on. Okay, all right, come on.
Oh,
Oh,
look
I
at
feel
this
so
guy.
bad for our listeners who aren't on video.
Big freaking
Fluffy.
Mike
Yeah,
with the big
he's a
freaking
big
cat
fella.
there.
Oh, he messed my mic up.
John, you just went sicko mode. Big freaking Mike with a big freaking cat.
Big freaking Mike with a big freaking cat. We like it.
All right, where were we? The second election you have to have 75% plus one, and that is an extremely difficult threshold, and it makes it nearly impossible to unionize here in Colorado. Not entirely, obviously. I'm part of a union at this moment, but it definitely inhibits unions. In fact, at my previous job, I tried to start a union. We had 50% plus one, and essentially we didn't have the 75%. So the union wouldn't even, bring us to the first election because we didn't have the guarantee that everyone would be paying the dues, because they don't want free riders, obviously. And I don't blame them. That's, that who you don't want to pay for people who aren't chipping in.
You've been organizing pretty hard on TikTok. I've tried to make a push on social media too to get folks to call Polis's office and tell him not to veto this. Bernie, we even got the attention of Bernie Sanders, who sent out, a push telling his supporters to tell Polis to veto this bill. Have you seen any response from Polis on this?
I have heard only crickets from Polis and his team on this. Despite, I call, probably once a week just to remind him. And then again, I'm usually posting once or twice a week, asking Coloradans, it's up to us. If you want to make it easier to unionize in Colorado, you got to do the work. You got to make those phone calls. And not everybody wants to put in that work. And what I tell people is save the number, save your representative's numbers in your phone. That way, if you hear something, you can just call them right up and say, hey, don't do that or do this. And I'm just encouraging people to get more involved and to be active in the politics of labor and in general.
Now, there's this whole thing going on. Oh, go ahead, John.
You're out there in the rank and file. You're taking a lot of action to defend the priorities of, workers, the people that you work with, the working class generally. Talk about what it's like to, be let down by, we're not talking about Trump here or a Republican governor, but talk about what it's like to sometimes be fighting back against the party that's claiming, to have labor as a base. What is that like in your case?
It's extremely frustrating. There's Democrats that want to have it both ways. They want to say they're for the working class, and they want to say, oh, well, who are you going to vote for? The Republicans who are for the billionaires? And it's like, you haven't shown me anything to say that you're not for the billionaires. I don't want to throw too much shade at Polis. He's done a lot of great things, as Eric was saying, in the cultural realm of politics, which is great. Again, we don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it's just not to as a white man worker.
Yeah,
it's great, and I support all those things, but you're missing white male workers who don't care about those things or feel the opposite of those things. You could be roping those people in, and instead you're leaving them to MAGA, because if you're not addressing the material needs of your population, then somebody's going to say they are and use that to bring fascism.
You mentioned being a white man worker, and there is a hell of a conversation happening around this right now. So the New York Times put out this coverage where it was an article, I think, where it was a big photo of Hassan Piker, right? The Twitch streamer. And it said progressive mind in a MAGA body, which is telling what the New York Times think a MAGA body is, just anyone who goes to the gym. He certainly doesn't dress MAGA. And so it's really telling that New York Times liberals just think people on the left are skinny, nerdy looking guys in the New York City area or Los Angeles, right?
I feel like that's kind of playing into it, right?
What a miss. Like, what an intentional loss, because so many people who are pro worker, pro union look like the guys on this call and the guy in my house who has the same views, who, you work out, you work with your body. Maybe you'll be mistaken for MAGA, but I don't know. Is it wrong to say that that's a MAGA body? What do you think, Mike?
I think so. Who cares what the New York Times says?
I'm trying to get my MAGA body right now, man. I don't know.
Yeah, you guys, there's nothing MAGA about being healthy or taking care of your body, or it's part of the internet culture. I think a lot of the fitness hustle culture folks have really fallen under the MAGA wing, and I think that's where this comes from. But yeah, I think it's ridiculous. I follow so many guys on TikTok who lift and are completely liberal, if not leftist.
Yeah, I mean that's what stands out to me. It's like, who are you being strong for? That's the question of like, what it really means to be a man, right? Like, are your muscles just for show, or are they to like, lift yourself and everybody around you up to be, strong in a union, to be strong for your community? I think it's crazy that, that's kind of been hijacked by this political movement that's sucking a bunch of young dudes into it. But one of the things I look at with the labor movement is an opportunity to rediscover what it actually means to be a man, to be, strong for the people that are around you in addition to yourself, and not to just like, put other people down to make you feel like you're a whole man or something like that. But I think that's what we've fallen into lately.
No, absolutely. I think there's more strength in doing things for your neighbors and for your community than there is in doing it for yourself. I lift weights because I lift all day at work. And if I ignore my body, then it's gonna show at work. Work is gonna be harder. I'm gonna be weaker and slower at my job. So it's just part of life for me. I love exercise. I love lifting weights. It quiets the voices in your head and makes the day go better. So I encourage everyone on the left to get out to the gym, get your body healthy, do it for you, do it for your community, and do it so you're ready if shit ever hits the fan.
Hell yeah. I think
Love that.
it's so weird to imagine in the context of labor, right? MAGA masculinity, because MAGA stands for letting corporations exploit the working class, raise prices, lower wages, bust our unions. And so what's masculine about, bending over and letting your boss do whatever he wants, letting your boss exploit you, but a guy bumps into you at the bar and you're like, what the fuck are you doing, man? But when your boss pays you less than your labor is worth and has you come in with no overtime pay, that's the money you bring home to your family. You're getting fucked over. That's not very masculine of you to be against organizing your workplace and standing up for what's yours.
Yeah.
I don't know. I say this not as a man in America right now.
And there's something to be said for the depression rate in this country, especially among men, compared to union membership rates. I think there's a lack of community in this country. They want us to be separated. They don't want us to work together. They don't want us to know how strong we can be when we, link arms and put our collective will towards something. And I think a lot, especially, in capitalist circles, there's this idea of like, the rational consumer only does what's good for them. I think that's bullshit. I think this is propaganda that they've used because They know that if we work together and we put all of our energy into something, they can't stop us. And all this
Yeah.
propaganda since the Red Scare, since Ronald Reagan, all this propaganda has gone into making us an individualized society where we, don't work together. I mean, when I was organizing the union at my last workplace, it was crazy. There was, first of all, grown men who don't know what a union is. And, then they're like, oh, well, that sounds like some commie shit. And I'm like, bro, we're working inside of capitalism. Like, this is the furthest from communism like you can be, other than us going to the boss and saying, hey, pay us what we're worth or we're gonna walk.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like men need to not be having the conversation 100 men versus one gorilla. And instead, it needs to be 100 million men versus one Jeff Bezos.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I was gonna say it
That's
sounds
right.
like the gorilla is Jeff. I mean, personally, I feel like the cure to male loneliness might be a picket line and a bomber jacket. I don't know. What do you think, Mike? Does that line up with your experience?
Sounds good to me. Some pizza in there wouldn't hurt either.
So,
I will say this, the best way I've gotten guys to show up to our union meetings is telling them that there's food.
Yeah. Come out, you can discover alternative ways to be a man that also line your pockets and take down billionaires. Sounds pretty good to me.
That's right.
yeah.
And there's
I
free
think that's
pizza.
maybe what's been missing from a lot of organizing is like that community of taking care of each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you look at things like the VFW, like a lot of them have bars and places to hang out, and I think that's kind of missing from. I can only speak to the union I've been in, but like I think that's missing. Like, where is there a place for us to get together and just hang out outside of our monthly meetings?
Mm. Yeah, I say this as a spiritual person, but I think like the church has become the only place people are finding community. And so people are spending like outsized time in church, and we're seeing a lot of like evangelism dictate like politics. We just opened a school nearby that is like our first sort of religious school in the area, and they received like double the applications for what they have seats for. There's just so much demand for that. And I think a part of it is like people want community. It's more than just like evangelism and religious extremism. And I think like a union hall is a good place to spend your time. I want to talk about some of the organizing you're doing as well. It's not just labor organizing. You're getting involved in politics, Mike. What have you been up to there?
That is also correct. So me and my wife actually, we had to make a hard decision in November. We're lucky enough to have some money saved up and some equity in our condo here in Denver, and we had to decide: are we going to run? From the country? Like, are we going to move to Spain or Ireland or somewhere, or are we going to stay and fight? And sorry, I get a little emotional, but we decided to stay and fight. So we've been trying to get more involved in the Democratic Party, and that's not it's not our first choice. I've never really considered myself a Democrat. I was normally an independent, and then when Bernie ran in 2016, I made the switch and registered as a Democrat. And then the Democrats proceeded to screw him over twice. And it's been extremely difficult to remain a Democrat, honestly. But we made the decision, frankly, in winner take all politics, there's two choices. And, you can run as a DSA or a PSL or any of these other, left wing parties, the Labor Party starting up. Shout out to those guys. I think it diminishes your chances. And I think it threatens letting Republicans win. And that's not a shot at any of those guys. I respect everything they do. I respect everything they stand for. But when it comes down to winner take all politics, you either got to win or lose. And so my goal has been to get into the Democratic Party, remain in touch with all these other parties, and kind of have a coalition government, even if it's under one name. So that's kind of what I've been doing. I'm in the Labor Party Discord. I've been trying to reach out to like the local DSA and PSL, who has been really really vocal at all the local rallies, the 50-51 rallies, all that. So been getting with those guys, been going out to the rallies. And I guess the main thing I want to push to people is the Democratic Party is a shell. It's empty. We went there, me and my wife. I'm 35, she's 30, and we are the youngest people in the room every month.
Like Mark Blythe, who's a Scottish man, said, Americans, if you don't like your leaders, just wait for them to die. And I remember him saying that, and it's hilarious. But we don't
If
have
they
time for
died,
that.
if they died, there'd be nobody else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like people, like it's again, it's very frustrating because there's trying to convince young people like, hey, show up, go out, go. Like it's once a month. We have these House district meetings. Just show up. Me and my wife showed up. We've been involved for 3 months. I'm already a precinct organizer. She's already head of the county Young Democrats. And again, half of us age out this year. It stops at 35. I'm out. The chair is out. And she's going to be basically running the joint here in a couple months. So, but yeah, shout out to Colorado Young Democrats, or Arapahoe Young Democrats. If you're listening to this and you're wanting to get involved, reach out, and then reach out to your county party and show up to these meetings, because I'm telling you, man, it's empty, and we have a real opportunity to make some headway and bring this party to the left as much as they're going to kick and scream about it. I mean, if you just show up, you can get a leadership position. That's how empty it is in there. So that's what I have to say there.
Yeah, you know what? I'm so glad that you're doing it, and I'm of several minds on this. I have recently written a Substack piece that's, in places where the party is viable. I think my own personal opinion is that's how it should be done. It should be taken over from the inside. Now, in places where it's not viable, like West Virginia, I think people should be running as independents. There's a baker's dozen of Democrats who are elected in West Virginia. There functionally is no party. There's plenty of states that are out there like that I think labor independents like Dan Osborne running would be really good. In the other parts, I think what you're doing is really commendable, because that's what people don't realize. If you're not involved in party politics, you don't realize that all of these Democratic parties, if they're little county parties that are sprinkled around, and you can walk in there and it's going to be retired people, if any people at all, and they will hand you the party infrastructure. And in places where it's viable, why that is so important is because oftentimes the state party there is where a lot of the establishment figures exert control over primaries. And if they don't have anybody standing in their way to, for example, make an endorsement in a primary, or, pull any number of levers to advantage the establishment candidate over, a labor insurgent candidate. If they don't have people standing in their way in the machinery of the party, that is how you get, at the most extreme example, things like Bernie Sanders and the interference in primaries there. I'm speaking from experience because I ran in Ohio, and the state party there and the county parties, they didn't have reformers in the wings there. And I was coming up in the polls, and they ran a guy at the last second and endorsed him on the sample ballot. We tried to stop that through an inter-party fight, but there just weren't the numbers for people to have that fight and to win out against the establishment, which I fully, like you outlined, expect to kick, scream, and try to keep the status quo alive. But to me, if they're able to do that, it puts us all at risk, which is why it's important in the places where parties are viable to have folks go in there and actually do battle within the party where it's viable. So really commendable, Mike. I appreciate you.
And I do want to say the local folks are not the problem. I will say that when we showed up to our Arapahoe County Democrats House District meeting, the local folks are so excited that you were there. They are stoked. They're like, oh my God, somebody under 40.
Someone new.
Yeah. So, don't be intimidated. Like, it's not the local, it's the party heads. It's the people like Jared Polis. It's the people like Pritzker. Like, it's these 100 millionaires, billionaires. It's the people running the party that are going to fight us. It's not the local folks. So don't be intimidated to go to your local party and show up and be there. I think a lot of them realize that it's time for a new generation. And I think our generation is done with neoliberalism. I think we're done with austerity politics. We've seen the results, and it's awful. It's what got us here now. And people like who's old raging Cajun boy,
James Carville
from Bill Clinton's time, James Carville, like fighting David Hogg. Bro, go away, like retire. Like what you have to say, you're not going to be here when any of this comes to fruition. Like, I hate to say it, but let us decide the future of this country. Let us decide the future of this party. And I think it's time for the boomers to have a seat, man. We're done. Like, we learned about the Red Scare in school. Like, I don't believe any of the propaganda that you guys were raised on. And I think we're done with it. And it's time to move on from this Red Scare. Socialism and communism are bad words. They're tools. They're tools. Capitalism is a tool. Socialism is a tool. And it's how we use them that I think is going to make the difference.
Yeah, it's amazing how many farmers out here in Iowa have signs by the highway that are like, Kamala worse than Biden, this is not God's plan with the left-wing politics, all kinds of stuff. And it's like farmers are the ones that get the most subsidies from the government. And that a part of that is because of the influence of global trade and circumstances, whatever. Regardless of the reason, they make a good living because of policies that anyone would describe as socialist in nature. So it's interesting that some of the far right wingers and even Democrats are critical of socialism, but maybe benefit from these programs that are very socialist in nature.
Well, they don't understand what socialism is. Again, they've been propagandized since 1980. Even before that, probably since the end of World War II. We defeated fascism. Well, what's next around the corner? Communism. All right, let's poison the well. So everything since 1950 has been the boogeyman of communism or socialism, and it's hard to overcome 50 years of programming. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I don't see it that way. I think, capitalism, even Karl Marx in Capital says capitalism is one of the greatest economic engines to ever exist. I just happen to believe it needs to be reined in. There are excesses in the system. It has to be reined in. And if we rein it in and we steer it in the direction we want, it can be a great tool to accomplish things like moving to a greener economy and ensuring people are paid enough. And the government currently is, controlled by octogenarians, and they're all victims of this programming. And I think it's going to be a generation or two before we move past this.
Yeah, I think some people hopefully are ready in the MAGA movement, and there's little indications of it by saying, oh, RFK Jr. is so great because of course the companies that are selling us the cancer causing medicine and products are the same ones that benefit off of hospitalizations and whatever. They're starting to realize the perverse interest, but for some reason will not say, oh, this really rich guy is telling me this is good for the economy. Of course he's telling me the truth. It's I just don't think billionaires have our best interests in mind. And you can tell by the actions they take, but also just think about it logically. Why would they? Of course they want to make more money. And so I think maybe they're getting close to realizing that. And
I think that's a problem the Democrats have had. I think that's why they're losing, because they can't, they're afraid to. They can, but they're afraid to say that the problem is free reign capitalism. You let the most powerful in society run roughshod over everyone else, and these are the results you're going to get. You have to have a balance. I think there isn't a real free market anywhere in the world. Government has a role to play. I think it has a larger role to play than a lot of folks do. But I mean, the perfect example is the ACA. Originally it included a public option, and the insurance companies got a hold of Obama, twisted his arm until we didn't have a public option anymore. And I think the government can serve as a counterbalance to some of these excesses of capitalism, like we see in the health insurance industry, like we see in groceries right now. What would a government run grocery store with prices that it could buy wholesale from farmers? What would that do to prices compared to the capitalist, Walmarts and stuff who just jack up prices at a whim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like we have so much excess in America, and like our most basic needs have been turned into commodities for profit and have been made scarce intentionally. We have to pay more than we can afford for them. And I think people are slowly realizing that that's a huge problem. That's what's produced homelessness. That's what's produced people being incredibly unhealthy and then declaring bankruptcy because they don't have health care. Because, like, maybe we can have a market for the other extra stuff, sure. But definitely we should guarantee everybody has what they need to survive. I mean, Adam Smith wrote that's how human beings became the dominant species on the planet, because we hunted together to be able to eat bigger game and the meat grew our brains. And it's a good theory that because we could cooperate, we were able to be so great. And this is the guy who's known as the father of capitalism. And
Yeah.
so I
And
think
I
people
think
are ready for these ideas.
like social scientists have said, what do they look for at the to say a society has started or has evolved past, animal nature? They look for healed bones, because that means somebody took the time to take care of a sick, injured person, had to set the bone, had to feed and water them while they couldn't walk. And that's the first sign of a civilization is people taking care of each other and not just leaving people behind to die.
You know what? That in a 10,000 years, Mike, they're going to be digging up American bones and be like, this was an uncivilized society. What was going on in America in the 2000s?
That is funny.
No good bones. So, Mike, for the people who sort of agree with you and what you think about labor and who live in Colorado, what's going on for May Day in Denver?
So today we have a rally at 3 p.m. at the state capitol. I'm not sure when this is airing, but if you hear this today, get out there. And then on top of that, just please call Jared Polis. In fact, let me give you his number and ask him to support the Worker Protection Act.
That's actually a better ask because our producer got called into work, so we might not be able to get a clip out before this happens in an hour.
No worries. Jared Polis's office is 303-866-2885. So yeah, if you have time, please give him a call. Ask him to support the Worker Protection Act here in Colorado. That's going to make it easier to unionize and make it easier for working folks to get what they deserve.
Thanks so much for coming on, Big Friggin' Mike. You want to tell the people where they can find you and your TikTok and all that?
Yes. And once again, I am Big Friggin' Mike. That's Friggin on TikTok. So find me there for all of your Colorado labor and politics. I usually try to stay up to date, but sometimes in construction, you don't have time. So
did Friggin come out of people not knowing how to say Francingue?
No,
Okay.
It's actually, I think when I first made a Facebook in like 2010-ish, like you had to like do the little end of the river, Facebook.com/, and I just, my buddies called me Big Mike at the time and just kind of came up with it on the fly.
Love that. Hell yeah. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you guys. Good to see y'all, and hopefully be back someday.
Happy May Day.
Happy May Day.
Thanks,
absolutely.
Big Friggin' Mike. All right, welcome back to the Jess and John pod. We are joined today by Eric Blanc. Eric is the author of We Are the Union, How Worker-to-Worker Organizing is Revitalizing Labor and Winning Big. He's an assistant professor of labor studies at Rutgers and an organizer trainer in the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. He writes the Substack Labor Politics. Eric Blanc, welcome to the Jess and John Pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we only have you for a second, but go a little deeper on your bio and tell us about yourself and the work that you do.
Sure. Yeah, I come from a union family in the Bay Area. I had a lot of jobs before I became a professor. I worked on the docks for a couple of years. I was a rank and file teacher. Couldn't make ends meet in the Bay Area. Ended up going to grad school, learn about labor movement. But mostly I've been organizing. I've been organizing the labor movement for about 20 years. And the most recent two big projects I've been involved in one was helping found the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, EWOC, which supports any worker in any part of the country start self-organizing. That kind of came out of the Bernie campaign and the crisis at the beginning of the pandemic. And then since Trump got elected, I've been supporting and spending sort of a crazy amount of hours organizing with the Federal Unionist Network, which is the main rank and file pushback against Trump in the federal sector.
Yeah, I am looking forward to getting into that. And this is a good day to do it. It is May Day, of course, International Workers' Day today. But before we get into that, can you talk about what that means for people who don't know what the significance of is for today, especially in this political moment?
Yeah, May Day. You know, it's funny because May Day originated in the U.S. Really, this is an American tradition that ended up spreading to the rest of the world. Comes out of the fight for the 8-hour day, immigrant workers taking the lead, and then because of McCarthyism, essentially that tradition got lost and taken from us in the U.S. So every other country celebrates Labor Day on May 1st, International Workers' Day, except for the U.S. That has to do with essentially the government breaking us from our tradition. So it's really important that we have as many people out in the streets as possible today and bringing back this tradition of international solidarity and class struggle.
Yeah, it feels like a good time to rediscover those roots. They're important to me, of course, you know, because I'm out of West Virginia, and a lot of those really important labor battles, of course, happened here. I'm wondering if you could get into, you know, we'll cover the political aspect of this, but just give us an outline of the challenges that labor is facing under this regime, specifically, in a sense of how what we really need to do in this moment to fight back.
Yeah. Look, I think probably all listeners have a sense of how bad things are, right? Like you might have heard of Donald Trump,
right, Eric?
You might have heard of a Donald Trump. Yeah, but you know, the reality is though that it would be hard to overstate the stakes. We're facing a billionaire takeover of the government, an authoritarian coup. And I don't see any force in American society capable of defeating that other than the labor movement. The Democratic Party is missing in action. You know, the force that has the numbers and the strength and sort of, frankly, the politics that's capable of cohering a majority against the billionaires with the power to defeat the billionaires, that's the labor movement. And the labor movement is a lot weaker than it needs to be. You know, we should have a workforce that is half the workforce at a minimum is unionized. We have a workforce that right now is only 6% in the private sector, 10% total. So there's a lot of growth that needs to happen, but the labor movement is insanely popular. You know, it's record high numbers. There's a lot of momentum coming out of the last 4 years of labor organizing. And so there is this moment now where unions can and should be taking the lead to defeat Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and saying, you know, it's not just about democracy. It's that we need to defend everything that we have, from Social Security to Medicaid to our unions. And I think it's by combining this fight against authoritarianism with the like day-to-day concerns of working people that we're going to be able to win. And there's a real danger if you divorce these two, that leaves the ground for MAGA to secede, I think.
Yeah, I think like the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, for any of our listeners where this is the first you're hearing of it, like when COVID hit, there were so many workers that were facing extremely unsafe working conditions. And the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee really taught a lot of workers how to organize within their workplace. And so much good organizing came out of that moment in time. Can you just talk a little bit about the era of labor we were in before Trump became president, that he's now, you know, governing in? But tell us about sort of the growth in the labor movement and how COVID kind of changed the labor landscape.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the case that COVID was a shot in the arm for a lot of worker organizing, because sort of overnight it became clear that your bosses didn't care if you lived or died, right? And so that was a radicalizing factor for large numbers of workers. But I actually think that this uptick in labor, sort of grassroots labor organizing, you can trace it back even before the pandemic. I would really highlight the red state strikes. So, for John and others, the West Virginia strike 2018, that really kicked
Teachers.
off. Yeah, teachers, right? So teachers illegally struck in Republican led states and they won. And I think it's important to frame it that way because it gives a shot of hope for people like, oh, what could we possibly do as workers under Trump? Well, look, these strikes, Oklahoma, Arizona, West Virginia, they won big, even though they had no rights to unionize, even though strikes were illegal, they still won. And so I think that grassroots energy continued after the pandemic. We saw it in Starbucks, we saw it in Amazon. But the reality is that the labor movement uptick in these last 5-6 years has come from below. And I think we're still seeing that even under Trump. So now, Trump's in power. A lot of the union leaderships, unfortunately, are very risk averse. They're very sort of tied to the Democratic Party establishment still. And so, yeah, formations like EWOC, Starbucks Workers United, this, the new UAW, all of this sort of more grassroots energy is essential because I don't think we can wait for the kind of old labor leadership to take the lead on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all really important points here. And I'm wondering, you talked a little bit about the Democratic Party. Can you talk about the relationship looking out into the future that labor should have? Of course, we're stuck in this two-party system mostly because of winner-take-all politics. You mentioned how the Democratic Party, the only opposition party we have right now, is kind of missing in action. But I'm wondering what role does an opposition party that doesn't center labor, inequality, fighting back against billionaires, what role does that kind of party play in Trump's strength, with the working class, with the rank and file?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today if we had a different Democratic Party. Just the culpability of the Democratic Party in creating the political space for Trumpism, really needs to be underlined. Because if your politics, as it's been for the Democratic Party for decades now, is essentially neoliberalism, austerity, letting good jobs go abroad, and the most you can offer is cultural liberalism. And and I think it's important to not throw anybody under the bus. So I don't think we should just be tossing that away. But if that type of politics is all you have to offer working people, well, then it makes sense for a lot of folks, and not just white workers, black workers, brown workers across the board, and saying, well, look, these people don't speak to me. They're speaking a different language. They're clearly beholden to people who aren't like my family, who aren't like my neighborhood. And so, right, the reality is that the Democratic Party has for decades put forward this policy and did everything possible to smash an alternative, which was Bernie, right? So Bernie was the path to defeating Trumpism, right? And I still think Bernie politics is, and I think that the battle is far from over. We're seeing now, I have a lot of liberal family members across the country who weren't Bernie people, but who've gone to, they're like Bernie pilled now. It seems like Bernie and AOC are the only people who are saying what needs to be done, right? And so there's this real radicalization. It's pretty remarkable, right? The extent to which the Democratic Party base is now taking their lead from Bernie and AOC speaks to the default of the old Democratic leadership they're discrediting, and the fact that the kind of an economic populist message resonates. And I think people understand that you need to be able to speak to people's economic needs if you're going to defeat Trumpism. And that isn't just winning an election. You can win an election. We defeated, Trump in 2020, but MAGA continued. And so if we're going to defeat that as a movement, you need to be able to undercut the base of that, which is the reality of economic insecurity for the vast majority of Americans.
I want to ask you about something because you're an outside observer. You have a unique, I would assume, perspective on this, but there's kind of this divide in labor that maybe started when Amazon workers unionized their own warehouse, largely without any support from a legacy union. And most recently, there was a vote in North Carolina where Gardner Amazon workers tried to unionize, and they had these promises from legacy unions. One of the workers told me directly, they pretty much abandon us. That was Idolo Medelius. And then the leader of this, Reverend Ryan Brown, was a little bit more biting in his criticism. And I think it's a really clear point. He said, The other criticism with the legacy union, why did y'all wait so long? If you're so expert at this, did you not see the existential threat that Amazon was as the evil empire was growing? Why did you let this Goliath? You watched this Goliath grow. You could have killed this in the cradle, but you never took the challenge. Now all of a sudden, you're coming out and you want to challenge the Goliath. And I think some workers feel left behind by legacy unions, which is an incredible problem for labor strength in America. What do you make of that divide, and maybe what do we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge problem. It's not just Amazon, but you're right. Amazon's maybe the best example of this. But frankly, the labor movement for decades now has not been investing in new organizing. And so what that means is the labor movement at best has been protecting its own members, and frankly, not even protecting its own members very well oftentimes. But at best, it's really just been sort of a narrow interest group in defense of the small minority and shrinking number of workers who are already in unions. And the problem with that is that you are leaving the vast majority of working people behind when you are not going out and organizing the unorganized. And so, yeah, the resentment, I think, of Rev Ryan and other folks at Amazon is not just there, it's across the board where the labor movement wasn't seen, and frankly, maybe still isn't seen by many workers as an organization of and for them. It seems as something sort of separate and detached. And so I think that has to turn around ASAP. The labor movement is sitting on over $30 billion in assets that it is not using, right? That it has in its war chest, but that could be used for organizing, that it hasn't used for organizing. And so, yeah, now is the time for that. Obviously, we have to start by defeating Trump, so this is the sort of step one in the battle, is to defeat all of these attacks on unions we're seeing. But that has to be combined with going on the offensive too, organizing Amazon, putting real money to the Amazon campaign, winning a first contract at Starbucks, organizing the South in auto. These are go hand in hand, because think about Tesla, for instance. Elon Musk is the administration. Well, you can unionize Tesla. There was a unionization effort at Tesla. These aren't sort of like two separate battles, the political and the economic. They have to go hand in hand. Same with Amazon. Bezos is up there kissing Trump's butt. And so why not go organize them? And frankly, and this is one thing I'm very proud of, EWOC helped support the first union victory at Whole Foods just earlier this year. Under Trump, workers won the union election at the Whole Foods in Philly, and that's Jeff Bezos. And so it shows that it can be done even under Trump. And if we need unions to sort of start taking their lead from workers and not just waiting around.
That gives me hope, Eric.
Eat that for dinner, Jeff Bezos. Eric, I want to thank you for coming on the show. We only have you for another minute before you got to get out of here. Is there anything else you want to speak to or let our listeners know?
Sure. I mean, I think that a few things. I'll just make a general pitch for like what can be done, and then give a few resources for folks of how to get plugged in. The first is, I think the most urgent battle right now is the fight around the federal workers, right? Because the federal workers, this is like the test case for Trump and Musk to be able to see if they can destroy the labor movement. They're trying to take away unionization rights for over 1 million workers. They're trying to destroy Social Security, Medicaid, all of these things. And the federal workers are like our side's best and most important army to stop that attack from happening. But it's going to require the whole community, right? All of us are affected if they take away our Social Security. All of us are affected if all of a sudden you can't drink water because there's no one protecting you from the companies that want to pollute it, right? Like, these are existential questions for most working class Americans. And I think it's time like we really step up, not just through petitions and things like that, but through mass protests, direct action. It's that level of urgency is required, I think, if we're going to stop that. And so the easy way to plug into that is you go to savepublicservices.com. You can sign up to hear about local actions coming up around public services, saving your federal services. If you're not in a union and you're a worker, you should unionize your workplace. This is the thing that we were talking about before, EWOC. Any worker in any industry, you can start self-organizing your workplace. You just go to workerorganizing.org, and you're going to get in touch, if you sign up on the forum there, with a volunteer organizer who can help you start taking action right now to organize your workplace. And my last pitch for like what you can do to get involved in labor movement is you should seriously consider becoming a SALT. Assaulting is a really important tactic that's been crucial over the last 4 years, for the last, frankly, 100 years in the labor movement, in which you get a job at a strategic workplace in order to unionize it. And there's a lot of really exciting salting opportunities right now in auto, at Starbucks, and Amazon. And so if you want to become a SALT, you should. And there's an easy way to do that. You go to bit.ly, so it's bit.ly/salt now, bit.ly/salt now, and you can sign up there, and we'll get you connected to some of the most important unionization campaigns in the country. Yeah, those are my pitches.
We can pass that on to the listeners. We will put that in the show notes. And to the listeners, EWOC, it's got a fun name, Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. They got a little book that you can order. I have it. I was looking for it behind me. It's really helpful. But Eric Blanc, thank you for coming on the show. That you can find Eric's work on Substack at Labor Politics. Anywhere else people should follow you, Eric?
Yeah, I'm on all the social media stuff, but laborpolitics.com, the Substack's the best place to find my work.
Thanks for coming on.
So those were two really good interviews. Timely on May Day, the biggest labor holiday. Thanks for listening, Jess and John. Nation, JJ Nash. It's been real.
It's been real, JJ Nash. Go out there, familiarize yourself with May Day. Get in touch with your inner solidarity. Seize the means of production. And until next time.
It's been really real. I had like a single tear streaming down for like the second half of Mike's interview.
It was powerful,
All right.
man. Love that.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.